Over the last, I think, month and a half, we've been working in 4 working groups on different cases on how to create some impact on this. I've been put forward sort of spokesperson of this group to talk about the grids and the regulations. My name is Diederik Apotheker. I work for InvestNL, is our National Promotional Institute. That's sort of what this category of government funds is called in the European context. So what we have looked into here is to see where are actually all these opportunities, and can we find some high impact, low effort contributions to unlocking it. I think the next group, they will show this and go deeper into the specific examples of where you can actually create these opportunities, but where it maybe in the end it comes down to is the sort of the relation to infrastructure and how we can benefit from it. I mean, infrastructure is it's an asset which is quite slow to grow. It's quite costly to do it. And so if you turn that around, you can see there's an opportunity arising if you can use flex and flex related business models to do it faster and cheaper. And in the meantime, create some opportunities for our industry and small to medium enterprises. So, what are we looking at here? So how can we actually support this? And how can we find those high impact, low efforts? Also, if you go to the next one, we can see basically a snapshot of our Dutch situation at this moment. We're seeing in this ecosystem that the growth of renewables is actually faster than the infrastructure can keep up with, creating some bottlenecks in our system. So the main growth is from wind and solar, but there's also some things on the horizon which are actually quite short on the horizon. So the electrification further of our transport system, introduction of hydrogen, the electrification of heat, both in our homes and in our industries. And so there's it's not over yet. And already we can see a large part of our country coloring red, meaning that these are areas of our grid where it's not longer possible to add new capacities. So using this infrastructure more efficiently creates lots of opportunities. And you can also see that it speeds up the energy transition if we're able to put some of those yellow and red areas onto green again. So as we've seen from the previous speakers, that's not really easy. So that's on the next slide. We have a list of the barriers. The stakeholder field is pretty wide and complex. So there's many parties in it. There's also a lot of initiatives already ongoing to discuss this topic. And it could require indeed further legal and regulatory updates. So we've seen that the European legislation needs to be implemented here, and there's new legislation coming, needs again to be implemented. And in the meantime, we have already our local, or say Dutch existing legal and regulatory frameworks and working groups and stakeholder groups and interest groups all represented there. So it is a quite complex field to actually change something. So in this, we were looking for some actions, right? So what could we actually do? And maybe that would get a bit detailed, but on the next slide, we would post them. And I would also really ask my working group members to also join maybe in taking questions or explaining these actions further. But the first thing that we saw is this diversity of markets reduces costs, has the potential to reduce the cost for financing. One of the barriers in these assets is that in the growth of these storage assets, it can be quite hard to get them financed. They are exposed to a lot of risk. This term was mentioned for it of the revenue stacking. So you try to get from a diversity of markets, you try to stack up these revenues. It increases complexity, but it also reduces the risk a bit because you're not dependent on one market. So I think that is something that we need to keep in mind when we are from a Netherlands perspective, designing these policies, that if you actually are able to generate more certainty in cash flow, the whole financing operation, the whole asset itself, the cost of storage will go down. The second point is also a really key one. Our grids are designed for peak power. It is also a legal obligation to get that done. But if we are able to find a set of rules and regulations that we can avoid that, it will lead to really significant cost reductions and speeding up and making a better use of the infrastructure that we already have on the ground today. And the third point, which we saw on this, also on the map of the previous slides, it was also mentioned in one of these other presentations, is local congestion markets. By adding more transparency on actual liquidity requirements. Maybe one more entry into this topic. Congestion markets is an option that can be added to put one of those red areas into yellow or green. But to actually do it, you have to have some liquidity in this market. So the grid operator needs to trust that there is sufficient supply and demand of the flexibility in that area. Are there companies able to ramp up their production or ramp it down or increase their consumption or decrease their consumption, whatever the grid situation at that time requires? Are there sufficient of those potential suppliers of flex in the area? Now, a lot of these areas remain red because there's not sufficient of them. Should you, however, turn it around and say we need at least 10 megawatts in 5 different parties, for example, if that kind of transparency would be added, you could incentivize entrepreneurs to actually offer that liquidity to that local market and thereby change it from red to yellow or hopefully even green again. So how would we propose to do this and get this all further? Since it's such a wide group, and it's really a system innovation question that we're facing, we concluded on a method using design sessions, where in a relatively small group, you can keep your momentum and propose new solutions. It's a bit outside the system of the current interest groups, see if there is any conventions or barriers that we need to tackle with this different perspective.